Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is Dawn Tur from SIG, and I'm so pleased to welcome you to today's webinar series. Now, before we jump into the webinar series itself, I want to just go over some housekeeping items. First of all, we invite you to share your comments and your questions with today's panelists, and you can do so by opening up the Q&A box in the lower corner of your square. Sometimes it's a little orange question mark, and you can type in your questions at any time during the webinar. If we don't get to your questions, which we are going to hold until the end, our panelists have said that they will respond in writing to every single question that comes in. So we're very lucky that they have agreed to do that. So keep the questions coming. That way we can get them all out to you at the end. Also, today's webinar is recorded and it will be up on our website tomorrow. So you have up to 3 years to share this with other colleagues in your company and ask them to go in and listen. All of the webinar material will be there. You can both listen and watch the webinar online. So with that, I want to tell you a little bit about some upcoming activities that are really exciting to us. And what I'd love to do is take you through just a few background slides about SIG. And Destiny, my slides are not moving for some reason today. So you can, thank you. So just a few things about our global events. There's a lot about SIG. We are not an event company per se. We are there for education, networking, and best practice sharing. But we do events in order to do that. Like today's webinar, our global events are peer-to-peer, where you can ask like-minded professionals about questions around commodities, services, anything you'd like. We also have a very robust career network. So if you have a job posting, please make sure to send it in. It goes out to about 24,000 people per week. We also have a student talent outreach program, which we're very proud of, where we partnered with 12 of the top universities in North America and Europe to bring the top graduating supply chain students to our members. And then we have a SIG Resource Center with over 5,000 tools, templates, methodologies, presentations there for you to download. So a couple of our global partnerships also included, and I want you to take the chance and go in and look at these. Go into the SIG Resource Center. You have 100% access to all of the Row Live, thousands and thousands of supplier intelligence reports available to you at no cost. HFS Research, the paid research that most people would have to have a subscription, you have access to it. You even get time with an analyst if you want. And then, of course, Art of Procurement, our podcast series. I encourage you to listen while you're driving to work or on a train or a subway. And if you have someone you'd like to nominate for Art of Procurement for the podcast, please let us know that as well. Our Global Summit is coming up in the fall. It's going to be at the Rancho Mirage in California. And this time, it's not only a summit, but we're also going to be having an amazing awards ceremony. There's still time to get your submission in. It's for buy-side, sell-side, buy-side, sell-side teams, and individual contributors. We have both rising stars and sourcing professionals who have been in the industry and have influenced it, all up for nomination. So please get your nominations in right away. And also, the Future Sourcing Awards, it does have the deadline of June 8th, but if you reach out to us and you're in the middle of submitting, and it's a very easy submission form, it takes less than 10 minutes to fill it out. Please let us know, and we can keep the link live for you for a couple extra days. But the nominations will close, and we're going to have to move on pretty quickly after next week. Also, we'd like to bring SIG out to you. So we've taken a pause on our live events this summer, just so everyone can go on vacation and not worry about missing something. But then we'll start up our CPO Meet and Meet in September, and our signature events as well. And we have a lot of cities between now and the end of the year where we will be going. So if you have colleagues in any of these cities, I encourage you to have them go and network at a local basis. It's great to build your professional network. And then SIG University, I'm so excited. We have now up over 1,000 students who have graduated SIG universities from over 9 countries. And it's amazing that we finally are creating a global language of sourcing that people, whether you're working out of Israel or London or San Francisco, you're all using the same language about sourcing. So the Certified Sourcing Professional course and the Certified Supplier Management Professional course start on July 16th. That's our next semester registration date. And we'll be kicking off another bunch of cohorts at that time. So hopefully you'll get some of your folks in there. So now, the reason you're here is not to hear me talk, it's to hear Fitbit's 3-factor formula for transforming supplier management. And with us today, we have 2 fantastic professionals. The first is Sonia Danforth. She's a Senior Global Category Manager at Fitbit. Sonia is a results-oriented strategic global sourcing professional with strong knowledge of sourcing practices, procurement, and contract management. She is part of a passionate team dedicated to health and fitness who are building products that help people transform their lives. Sonia brings a lot of creative vision and deep industry knowledge from Fitbit to Fitbit with previous stints at Salesforce.com, Zynga, and Symantec. And with her today, I'm so pleased to welcome Brian Hall. He's Enterprise Account Executive at Scout RFP. And Brian's helping enterprise procurement and sourcing teams through the implementation of strategic sourcing solutions. He joined Scout after leading the team at Guardian Analytics and has a degree from the University of Southern California. So Brian and Sonia, I'm so pleased to welcome you. And Sonia, you might want to know that I'm actually giving this webinar from a tread desk. So with my Fitbit on, needless to say. So I'm so glad to have Fitbit and obviously Scout RFPs for bringing Fitbit here. Thank you both, and let's get into the meat of the subject.
Well, thanks for the introduction, Dawn, and I'm delighted to hear that you're on a treadmill and loving Fitbit. And before I introduce myself, though, I want to just share some research which validates why we're here today. 2021 is actually here in 3 years, which is not that far out. And I know that you were going to think you were having a jetpack or a hoverboard by now. But the good news is that we do have watches that can track your exercise activity, location, heart rate, etc. But really what we need to be doing is digitalizing our procurement processes through a blend of qualitative and quantitative skill sets. Things are changing faster than we know it. And it's clear we as procurement professionals must also evolve with this ongoing new wave of technology. Traditional hierarchies are being replaced by networks, and it's now all about increased sustainability through innovative growth. So a little about myself and my journey here at Fitbit. I joined Fitbit almost 3 years ago, and at the time, the indirect purchasing organization had been in place about roughly a year and a half prior to my joining. So we're a relatively new function. We were already using NetSuite as our ERP system and had just rolled out Nexonia. Nexonia is a more user-friendly web platform for that integrated with NetSuite for our US employees. We had about 1,800 employees with an indirect spend coming into roughly 59 million. 59 million. However, the procurement processes here were still very manual. Excel files were still coming through to our small purchasing team, about 4, and many of our employees were not aware there even was a purchasing department. Our procurement function had not truly reevaluated how technology could fundamentally shift how we interacted with our internal stakeholders and our external supply base and bring to light the value that our procurement team actually had. So, what catalyzed the need for change? We decided to challenge the status quo to entice improvements. The only way to grow is to improve, and that's through change. To break down some of our challenges even further, nothing was efficient. Things would get lost in the daily back and forth with emails and spreadsheets. One person might be using Dropbox to save files, and someone else might be using a Google Drive, and things were being split in both areas. There was no central source of truth for anything. And when you sent an email, you need to CC yourself so that you could put it in a folder and trace and track everything. There was no process standardization. We lacked any reminders. If someone passed information on or a request onto a vendor, it would be missed because it may not have been known. And the biggest issue was being unable to answer vendors' questions. For example, if a vendor emailed me and had asked me about maybe a component design question, test plan questions, creation, compatibility, or basically any principal engineering questions, there was really no way I could answer them. And so it was back and forth email exchange with the internal business partners. And once we had the answer, I'd have to follow up with all of the other suppliers that were participating in an RFP. to keep consistent with a fair messaging process. Scout took care of all of this for us, which brought huge value add back to everybody involved, our suppliers, purchasing, and our internal stakeholders, from a resources and time perspective, of course. And so drastic steps were needed to completely rebuild our function with the digital technologies that could meet the demands of tomorrow. Technology challenges the status quo and provides us with opportunities to remove human error, increase capacity for spend, and minimize risk to enable the vital compliances that we had to adhere to. So fast forward 3 years, and now we have actually fewer employees, roughly about 1,800 globally, with operations in about 86 countries, and our team is managing an indirect spend of roughly 91 million, and our FY17 reported revenue was close to 1.7 billion. We are no longer using NetSuite or Luxonia as our ERP system, moving last year to SAP S4HANA. We have policies and procedures in place, and we have automated sourcing tools, and we continue to build and simplify on that, streamlining and automating as much as we can as we go. So I'm speaking today to share with you the vision and strategy we are working on to steer our indirect purchasing department towards digitalization, because we believe that a new digitally powered procurement function can significantly drive down costs and continue delivering strategic value to our organization. Quite simply, it pays to be modernistic. To do that, our 3 areas of focus are value beyond cost savings, cohesive planning strategies with key suppliers, continuing to stay sharp in our supplier ecosystem. And all 3 are designed around a strategic architecture that reinforces procurement's advancement, connectiveness, and competitive advantage. So my future vision is big, but we're not there yet. Let me break it down. It's around a holistic value creation, with applications at the heart of the architecture's inner workings, and then sourcing professional stakeholder suppliers, either our current strategic suppliers or our transactional suppliers, or even our uncharted suppliers that may be able to provide relevant and distinctive services to leading edge in solutions. It's an architecture that is built around applications like supplier analytics. Supplier analytics is about bringing together a wide variety of data through standard dashboards, something Scout is currently providing. This allows the procurement and the business to interpret analytics and solve specific problems. Having this variety of data helps answer questions or address any potential concerns that we may have. It's simple information. Where I see this pillar developing further strategically is that not only will analytics continue to provide the critical information and insights procurement professionals need, but that these tools will eventually convert to probably advanced analytics, meaning that these analytics tools will firstly use the data to measure, report, and recommend strategic approaches and direction to category managers. And secondly, I can see it going to that there will be, and actually this is something I'm working on at the moment, it's cognitive computing or artificial intelligence, where these self-learning systems use data mining, pattern recognition, natural language processing, so on, like chatbots. They'll be able to answer questions. They'll be able to get information, request feedback that provide internal stakeholders immediate and remarkable customer service experience via mobile or desktop. They even integrate with redirect questions through your internal chat tools like HipChat. And these cognitive computing systems will also be able to mimic the way the human brain works, which will basically then allow procurement professionals to remove the day-to-day tactical and no value add activities that consume so much of our time. There's also, for example, the virtual malls This is something I'm also currently exploring because most of us have or have built a form of these already through uploaded content that has been provided by our suppliers. They provide efficiency to the procurement process. Users can quickly select their items and order whatever they need. However, my vision is for a shift towards a model that is more comparable to Amazon, or at least Amazon's, like their slogan they use of being able to provide the Earth's most comprehensive product selection that offers full localization sites globally. Here we could offer various categories like new and refurbished items, products, professional services, subscriptions, certifications, stuff like that. So how are we going to bring this vision to life at Fitbit and tie it to what I call the 3 factors for transforming supplier management? Well, procurement organizations can't ignore this trend towards digitalization. In fact, in many organizations need to completely redesign their procurement strategies and start building long-term digital strategies. But quality can come from predictive analytics that extracts actionable insights from data sources, which leads to better informed quality decisions. Sustainability comes from systems that exhibit human-like intelligence through process learning, reasoning, and memory. Innovation comes from customer-supplier collaboration because it builds trust, and trust comes from involving your suppliers early on, demonstrating openness and sharing information, development plans, roadmaps, new product ideas, objectives. It's about working with your suppliers to help them improve their competitiveness in both cost and quality. It's asking your suppliers where you have failed as a customer, how you can improve to strategically partner and innovate. It's working with your suppliers to find and acquire that skilled human labor that best fits your company's strategic needs. It's internal communication, collaboration, and cooperation always. From an indirect perspective, when you have fewer vendors, they're easier to manage. You can have more cost savings and more innovation. This slide that's up now ties back to my previous slide and comments around innovation. Cohesive planning strategies can only happen through intermutual collaboration, communication, and cooperation. To maintain your competitive edge, procurement professionals must build strong, sincere relationships with their strategic suppliers, and you must commit to engaging in continuous and dynamic evaluations of these suppliers, especially when they are strategic partners. My vision is to bring in our major suppliers on site in a rotating capacity, kind of like what you see at events and shows, where the suppliers sit at their booths and you can go to them and answer questions on product, technical questions, or you can troubleshoot with them. Well, it's kind of like that, but without the booth. It'd be more a professional setting. Maybe we could allocate a space or an annex at our HQ office and in all our major locations. And every quarter, a new supplier comes in and sets up shop for that quarter. I really think this would be especially helpful for those higher level cross-functional engagements. It would also allow for the core teams to reside in-house. Then the supplier really becomes an entrenched contributor and ally for us. And so to stay sharp in the supplier ecosystem, you have to look at uncharted suppliers and transactional suppliers. You can't simply stick with strategic suppliers because maybe they're not being innovative. What if they were only using, let's say, SAP or Ariba? You don't want to block yourself off. And my virtual supplier room that I spoke about earlier allows this exposure. Virtual suppliers who are new and hot in the market can post what they're working on and doing, and then the business can go in and see all of this and get a feel for how they could interact with them. They can talk, ask questions through this one portal. And some of the key questions you need to be considering are, how do you identify emerging strategic suppliers? How do you work with the business to identify what you might be investing in this year? How do you find and onboard suppliers before they're actually suppliers? How do you reward your suppliers who are evolving? How do you identify change? How do you stay up to date with what's new? How do you identify suppliers who might be going the wrong way? For me, it's webinars like this to hear what peers in the industry are doing. It's reading up on procurement category-specific publications and websites like SIG. But more importantly, it's working with innovative suppliers like Scout, who proactively work with their customer base to ensure that everyone's informed of the full range of capabilities that they have and that they're working on that can support our business growth. So, to transition to Brian.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Sonia, for digging through that and giving us a little background and history on your approach at Fitbit. And I think at this point, I'd love to dig a little bit deeper into how we're going to actually take the next step, and as an organization, Fitbit's going to move forward here and jump into a little bit of Q&A.
Yeah.
And just as a starting point, I think one thing that I'm curious about on our end is what's holding you back from achieving this vision? You've laid out a great framework, and would love to just understand what some of those challenges look like.
Yeah, absolutely. As many of you know, with indirect spend, buying decisions are often dispersed throughout the organization into diverse and often competing business units or locations. It's stakeholders being resistant to change. It's managing indirect categories like marketing, pro services, and software. Because these categories require assembling a lot of historical data and reliable spend information for your negotiations. And it's because suppliers can only really become strategically innovative partners when communication channels are open both ends. To get that next level and become transformative means honing in on our supplier relationship management, conducting ongoing QBRs with our suppliers, and truly maximizing that value to get ahead of risk. It's about becoming a strategic leader, fully for the future. What I talked about earlier, that architecture, that diagram.
Perfect. And the next question I have here is, what did your supplier onboarding process look like, and what's the future state there as well?
Yeah, it was a mess. Yes, that image captures it all. Basically, we work with over 2,500 suppliers and are onboarding, roughly 5 to 6 a day. The problem with this is that no one was checking to see if we had other suppliers that could offer these services or in this space, and that have already been approved by our security or compliance teams. The business had to go in also and find the onboarding paperwork. Then they have to get the vendor to sign it. Then they have to come back to purchasing with that paperwork. And more often than not, when we get the paperwork back, there'd be information missing. So the forms would have to go back to the business, then back to the vendor, and then come back to purchasing. And then what we would see then is that category managers would get a request to approve a new vendor setup, and they may not be aware of the activity. So then they would have to reach back out to the business and ask them for more information on the purchase. So basically, I think if we were to look at this in numbers, our best case in calculating was probably we were spending 30 hours a week. And I think that calculates out to about 1,560 hours a year, something like that, which is a lot of time wasted with this.
Got it. And moving along here, next question is, what were you ultimately looking for in a solution in order to help achieve those goals?
We were looking for a one-stop shop, one single source of truth that everyone could access and work in. If someone left the company, you still have their input, access to what they provided. Sometimes the answers include technical requirements. You get to put the business users could go in and use the tool and provide their domain, their expertise to answer vendors' questions. It was important for our transformation because in order to become valued partners to the business, we needed to truly be able to maximize the value from our supplier relationships, and to do so at scale. This is how procurement becomes indispensable as a strategic partner. We need a seamless, simple, and streamlined way to know which suppliers are most integral to our business. We need to be able to identify potential supplier risks and their impact, and we need to, immediately know if a supplier is approved and cleared to work with. An easy way to segment our suppliers via data, so we could drill down and get the business partners' answers quickly.
All right, and a final question here is just what are some of the keys to success you're working through this transition so far, and what have been some of those keys to helping you get there?
Yeah, so I believe that the key to success here is collaborating early with your key stakeholders to establish a practice that helps them proactively track supplier performance. And it's about maximizing relationship value by establishing ongoing action plans to optimize performance and quickly identify when new suppliers are necessary. And managing risk by gaining better visibility into supplier review processes and tracking performance trends. And it's about improving compliance by implementing ongoing reviews and taking corrective actions for supplier, in cases of supplier business changes. They're really the key factors for success here.
Perfect. And I think at this point, to transition a little bit, and Sonia, thank you so much for digging through some of that history and sharing your vision here. I'd like to share a little bit around Scout and how we've been able to work with organizations like Fitbit to help achieve some of these goals. And Sonia spoke about things like driving supplier relationships and driving value there and minimizing risk. And at the end of the day, Scout is a solution and a platform that we're enabling our customer base to go and effectively execute on those plans. Behind the scenes, Scout is, at the end of the day, a simple, smart, effective solution, and that's our goal in the marketplace. So when we look at a Fitbit or some of our other customer base that we're working with here, the concept is to effectively empower organizations that we're working with to identify opportunities during a sourcing process, but also manage that supplier relationship in an effective fashion in order to drive value and minimize risk to organizations. So if we're looking at a customer base across Scout, and just a quick cross-section here, each industry, each vertical that we deal with will have its own intricacies, its own specialized aspects to it. But at the end of the day, that empowerment to be able to go and build a process and build a scalable relationship around your vendor base is shared across sectors, whether that's a technology company, healthcare, manufacturing, really a wide cross-section of companies where we've been able to effectively allow a platform and a solution to be able to go and build around. So Sonia shared some of her vision, where they're at as a company today versus where they came from. And Scout can be and is a big piece of that for a lot of these organizations. So at the end of the day, we've seen multiple ends of spectrums. I know a lot of you listening may be at different stages of a company, whether that's a Fortune 500 or a startup or somewhere in between. And Scout can be on both ends of those spectrum, and is on both ends of those spectrum, be able to have something as small as a procurement department that is just starting and looking to drive some of these initiatives, all the way up to scaling across enterprise-wide global deployments that are more mature in those processes and being able to augment that. So I think a big piece of the Scout solution is a holistic approach that Sonia's been speaking to. being able to handle a lot of the upstream activity that you have with suppliers on a day-to-day basis, all the way from project inception and being able to intake requests and directly collaborate with your internal stakeholders and business partners. Also being able to flow through to actively planning and effectively tracking all those individual projects and contracts within a pipeline. Scout is there to go from that planning stage to effectively drive the sourcing activity, to go and execute your sourcing auctions, identify the proper vendors, the right fit, make sure you're driving the right decisions as far as who you're going to be working with, and then obviously on the back end, supplier management to drive that compliance, make sure you're addressing your risk, and then the ongoing life cycle of your relationship with the supplier, being able to effectively scorecard, benchmark performance, and at the end of the day, drive value. When you sign a contract with a vendor, the worst case scenario is there's no communication and that collaboration stops on that day. Best case scenario is you continue to collaborate, you continue to work with them, and you drive real value out of that relationship, as Sonia's talked about. At this point, I know we have a few questions that have been flowing through, so happy to open that up to a Q&A session to both either Sonia or myself. If anybody has any questions, feel free to submit those through the WebEx here.
Thank you so much, Brian. And Sonia, that was great. So I have a few questions in queue. So the first one, and this is for both of you. How many people were involved delivering procurement/supplier management services before transformation versus now versus planned once the vision is fully realized?
Thank you. So the team was pretty small, and there's only a few of us. And to roll it out, you had to have technology. It was technology that was being needed. And the vision for the future I have is that the tactical piece of this could be automated through technology. So it ensures no project slips through the cracks, routing and customized contracts have milestones, assigning pending projects to appropriate category managers to facilitate smooth transition from request to execution. Everything that Scout was doing was something that was really helpful for our team. I hope that answers the question. Brian, if you want to jump in.
Yeah, I think I can anecdotally answer from what we've seen. We obviously deal with a wide, as we saw, a variety of companies, big, small, medium, large. And I think there's a few scenarios that we see, and one around more that supplier compliance, supplier relationship management. I think we often hear that this is a newer initiative for a lot of organizations that are trying to move beyond just the tactical aspect of procurement and sourcing and trying to look at that concept of driving value. And when you look at it that way, I think there's a couple of buckets. I think something like Scout specifically empowers maybe one or multiple current employees to save some time and be able to take on more activity with supplier relationship management. And I think the other side of the fence is actually going into a more dedicated, jump into the pull feet first type of approach, where we have seen organizations really dedicate a sole resource or go out and hire a sole resource to take ownership of that type of relationship building and working with suppliers on a day-to-day basis. So I think that in general, in our experience, this tends to be a newer initiative, and I think the approach is either split between undertaking this with current headcount, not necessarily replacing or augmenting or completely replacing a FTE, or going the opposite direction of making this a much more large-scale initiative and actually going and hiring for somebody to take on those types of activities.
Awesome. So the next question is, so what are some questions that, Sonia, that you use to drive these collaborative discussions with suppliers to drive innovation?
Can you repeat the question?
What are some of the questions you've used to drive these collaborative discussions that you've had with suppliers to drive innovation, planning, et cetera?
So it's more of bouncing ideas off each other. It's being brave enough to think of something so out there. Like I started off with, we thought we'd be wearing jetpacks and there'd be flying cars, but someone had to think of those ideas. You have to kind of think crazily and big and just start throwing out ideas and bouncing them off each other and saying, could you do this, could you do that? or it's like seeing the problems that you have, you know, on your day-to-day work. And, you know, I remember when we first implemented Scout and looking at the tool, I was like, you know, this would be great if you know, we have a chat feature back and forth, and they have that. Or, you know, I'd really love to see in Scout to implement like a WebEx tool, so that, like, you know, all in one place, we can just hit, you know, send, and it would send out a meeting invite, and you could WebEx with people or Zoom or whatever it may be with them. But it's only through, like, what are your pain points, and building off those pain points to come up with innovative ideas. It's not a set of specific questions per se. It's just think big, think crazy, think what do you need, what do you want, and go from there.
I love the way you explain it, though, because you're right. If someone hadn't suggested flying cars and put them in movies, no one would ever go there and make it happen for us. And so I love the fact that it sounds like Scout was very receptive to your what ifs and working with you on that, in that regard. Would you say that's true?
Absolutely. I have spent so much time with the team to build and build on ideas that you know, for the future, for growth, to support our company's growth. And they take everything I say seriously, and we work together. It's working with your key suppliers like Scout that are innovative themselves and looking to progress, that will help you also progress.
That's awesome. So can you answer, how long was the overall engagement with Scout to implement the system to deliver the alignment?
Brian, do you know exactly the time or a rough idea? It had started before as I was joining, so.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's not a problem. I think I can answer this more in kind of general scope of what we do. If you look at our customer base, obviously a deployment can vary from a handful of team members to an enterprise-wide global deployment. So if we look at both ends of that spectrum, generally Scout's going to be a fairly light IT undertaking. Everything is a cloud, modern, hosted solution, so nothing to install or actually deploy in a physical sense. And from that perspective, if we're looking at some of the smaller procurement organizations, we're looking at a time frame as little as a week to roll out a fully functional platform and configured, ready to go. If you're looking at some of the larger, more enterprise-wide deployments, typically we're looking at a 4 to 6 week window of having a fully functional platform available. So in general, it's not a huge IT undertaking, and a deployment for Scout typically involves some of the initial configuration, training, and really just empowering the team to make sure they're comfortable with the platform. But from that standpoint, without knowing the actual number right in front of me, I'm confident saying that the Fitbit rollout was under 30 days.
Wow, that's amazing. Wow. So this one, it said, for innovation and the what ifs, are these discussions Fitbit is having start with procurement or with the business units reaching out to procurement?
It's both, actually. It started off with me seeing something that could be obviously worked on and saying, is there anything that we can use internally here to build off of this? Or it can be the business coming to you and saying, like, we have this problem we need to solve, where do you think we can go with it? Do we have anything that maybe we could use? Are other teams using anything? And it's collaborating with the business and with your supplier, bringing everyone together to figure out together what the problem is and how you can solution it out.
Interesting. So Sonia, how did Fitbit come out about identifying and creating your 3-factor formula? Is this something you guys created yourself or influenced by another company or a study or what?
Yeah, it's actually been everything. So I remember I've read so many bits from so many forums that I've been on and peer-to-peer networking, things like this, that you hear a lot of this. Like, everyone's saying it's, the Internet of Things, everything's collaboration, you have to come up with this. I remember seeing something, I think it was CED had something about virtual suppliers and a way to interact with them. And I remember, like, I got the architecture from talking to people, from attending webinars, it was just everything coming together. And I think if you look at the leaders of these industries, they've all been saying it for quite some time now, that this formulation is where we need to start going, and it's just I haven't seen anyone really driving it. I'm really trying to drive it now, drive it forward to get it there. You know, we should be there.
Oh, I like that. So this one is for Brian, and it's and maybe I think. Hold on, I need to scroll back up. Looking at the horizon for supplier risk management, scalability, and transparency, we are hearing that blockchain will impact the future of supply chain management. How do you perceive blockchain to impact the industry broadly? Or do you have an opinion on it?
I have an opinion.
Oh.
I would love to see blockchain actually come from a P2P process. I've actually started to look at it because I think that the P2P process can be absolutely improved by blockchain. I just need to know more and in-depth knowledge about it before it can get there. But whoever said that, I would love to connect with you, whoever asked that question, because I've been thinking that for quite some time.
I'm glad you are, because I've been thinking about it for asset management as well. And I think it absolutely has a place, but we're hearing very few of the technology companies really addressing it. So, and Brian, you might not be the right one within your company as well, and we could maybe refer that to get answered internally from other folks in your organization if you want to do that, Brian.
Yeah, happy to do that. I think in general, blockchain, and then Sonia spoke a little to AI and how that has the potential to transform, especially on the more tactical side of sourcing the industry. I mean, these are the hot buzzwords, obviously, in any software space at the moment. So happy to connect the right folks with the right folks on our end to actually start exploring that a bit further. It's something that's definitely on our radar, on our roadmap to see how we can incorporate that.
Perfect. So, Sonia, was the vision developed in collaboration with Scout, or was a vision identified, then you went out and selected the best solution that helped you achieve your vision?
Kind of both. So Scout holds their CEB meetings where they bring together a lot of people in the industry, and there's so much knowledge in these meetings that they bring that you'd be sitting beside someone, you just start talking about ideas, what their pain points are, and then you'd be like, oh, let's ask Scout if they could do that. I think their tool has the capabilities. Let's see if they're planning to go there, if it's something that we can put on their radar, plant the seed. So it's not. I guess it's building with your peers, again, back to building with your suppliers too, and innovating from there. It's taking all the data points that you're getting all this information from and merging it and trying to articulate what you're looking for that is a plausible way of rolling out a new function.
Very good. So, Sonia, how do you identify emerging risks among potential suppliers?
This is very difficult. Because you're taking a risk with a new supplier, obviously you can do your background checks and you talk to customers that they've worked with. That's a huge part of it. It is, I know we do background checks and we say, can we get three references from people who've worked with before, but it is about calling those people and talking with people that have implemented it. Even before you engage with a vendor, I have asked the vendor, can I speak to someone similar to a company like Fitbit? And they say, oh, we give our references after, we're kind of onboarded. And I'm like, no, I need it before then. I need to talk to them now to see how they use it. I don't want to close my mind off to a solution they're offering me. Maybe there's a bigger solution that the vendor, that the other party that they've worked with can plant in my head or help me to develop our process better. So it is a tricky one, but and you have to take some risk, and it's moving forward. The risk is moving forward. If it's an educated, data-driven risk that you're comfortable with, you've got to go with it.
Very good. From the stages of Fitbit's procurement, operational, transactional, et cetera, how many months or years per stage thus far? And who has defined these stages, and what does it mean to be at those stages?
I think it's just the general stages of development. I don't think that anyone really defines them. It's when you have an operational stage that you feel is complete and working well, and there's process in place, there's formalities, and you feel like it's down and it's working, and it's just goes through the motions daily. It's not consuming a lot of your time. Then I think you move to the stages when you can tick most of the boxes that you're doing, and quickly, efficiently, you move on. I hope that answers the question somewhat.
Yeah, and so folks, what I want to stress too is that both of our presenters today said they'd be happy to follow up with any of you after today's webinar is complete. And when Destiny sends out today's webinar PDF to you, she will include contact information for both of our presenters. And they've also agreed to answer the questions in writing and send them out to you. So you guys are bringing us some fantastic questions, and I want to make sure that we keep the conversation going. So you will have the contact information, and if we're not answering your questions point on right now, pick up the phone, send an email, and make sure that you keep these conversations going. So Brian, how is Scout used to address vendor management, specifically for compliance?
Yeah, that's a great question. And to think back to the sort of approach and the platform that we have, it all starts very early. So obviously selecting the right vendor is a huge piece of that, and then continuing to work with them on a day-to-day basis. So basically in the front end, empowering our customer base to go out and have the tool set to identify and vet out vendors. And then going more into the realm of supplier management, being able to benchmark their performance over time, onboard them, make sure you're hitting those check boxes, make sure you're doing the right process and following at least some sort of process to be able to appropriately assess the risk first off, and then once they are on board as a vendor, continue to actively monitor that relationship. Not only how well are they performing, but year on year, are we staying up to date with the certifications, the documentation, contact details, whatever it may be. Compliance to each organization is a little bit different in the size and scope. So to make a long story short here, it's providing a method to build your process around so that you're hitting those check marks, you're hitting the steps that need to be done in order to properly vet and assess that risk.
Perfect. And so, Sonia, what was the single largest inefficiency that was fixed as a result of Scout? Is there one?
Yes, I think it was collaboration. It was a seamless collaboration between teammates, stakeholders, suppliers. It was just made so easy with Scout. You know, there was a team chat, there was, reminders, automated assignments, milestone notifications, user-friendly features that could break down silos and get everyone on the same page quickly. It definitely was collaboration. It just really hit the nail on the head there.
Wow. Brian, you got the perfect person to speak about Scout. I mean, I can just hear the joy when she's speaking.
No, it's true. It's definitely true.
Well, I do these webinars all the time, and sometimes you get the person on the other side is like, well, I don't know. It made ordering office supplies easier, but the passion you put into, the emotion and the passion you put into how well and how this has really changed your work life is really fantastic story. So I'm enjoying your answer. So thank you.
Thank you.
So Sonia, another question. How does Fitbit encourage innovation within the sourcing organization itself?
I think that's a difficult one to answer. I know innovation is definitely inherent in me, but I always try to think outside the box. I try to think differently. But we're encouraged to, get on these type of webinars. We're encouraged to take internal training, external training. We're encouraged to meet with peers. we're definitely encouraged to sit with our suppliers and reach out to them regularly and have weekly calls with our top tier suppliers. And it's through all of those things, subscriptions to forums. It's all of these things that keep you current and keep you innovative, and hearing what others are doing and understanding their challenges and how you could maybe help solve their challenges that lead to something else. It's like stepping stones. But I think it also has to be within you. You want to drive change, and you want to see something new, and you want to get better. So you have to be motivated as well to want those things and get what you need.
I love that. So obviously, if you have fewer suppliers, they're easier to manage. But someone asked, how do we deal with a monopoly situation that can arise? Them being less proactive, less innovative, there's no competition, the problem of complacency. How would you address that? Do you have an advice for someone?
Yeah, I think it is. It is maybe going back to my earlier comment about making them an extension, like bring them on site, make them part of the team, make them like the 6-month rotation, have them on site, make them feel like they're really integrated with you and decision makers with you, building that trust with them and building that partnership and opening up as to what your plans are, what your objectives are, making them feel like they're really invested with you. Because when they're a part of this, it does turn things around. I know monopolies are hard. We have a few ourselves in the software end, CAD, licensing and stuff like that, but it is very difficult to negotiate pricing with those type of vendors, but you can negotiate other things. You can negotiate the innovation. You can, see what other options they have for you, what other benefits you can draw from them.
That's good, really good advice. So, Brian, how can Scout streamline the logistics involved in supplier onboarding? It's such a pain at our company.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that's a really common struggle, too, with a lot of the companies that we speak to on a day-to-day basis. And a lot of it is starts with process. So Sonia talked a lot about that. It's first defining what your process and those steps look like, and then leveraging Scout to help execute on that. So being able to define an onboarding process to properly vet and bring a new vendor on board, and then taking it a step further, and down the road you'll see some more from Scout on the whole idea and concept of more of a self-service model for your vendors to be able to go in and self-update their details. They change banks, they can go in and update that type of contact information. So I think looking at the long term is how do we have a little more self-service, have a little more automation to fit the process that works for you.
Perfect. And Sonia, when time and resources are, when time and resources are limited, what is your best practice to achieve connection with suppliers?
Again, that goes back to my vision of having these virtual category rooms and these virtual supplier rooms. So if you take when time and resources are minimum, that idea of having a one place to go to, where you would have maybe social feeds coming in with data from more social sources, or the vendor can come in and chat with you immediately and you can bring the business in. It's about having a one-stop shop where everyone can come together and have all the information in one location to grab out and use and quickly make decisions. Hopefully that answers the question. It all goes back to my vision for having those virtual category rooms and virtual supplier rooms.
Perfect. So that is it in queue right now, but if people, what we're going to do now is we're going to open up the box on your screen where you can download today's slide deck directly to your hard drive. And while that's downloading, if anyone has any last minute questions, send them in. And once again, we will get the questions answered and out to you. There you go. Just click on SIG Scout RFP and you can download directly. And then if you have any other questions, we'll make sure to route them. So keep sending them in until we close the webinar at the top of the hour, and we'll make sure that our presenters get them. And Sonia, I want to thank you so much for your passionate depiction of Scout and how great it's been for Fitbit. And Brian, you've picked the perfect person, and I love the presentation. So thank you for bringing Sonia, and thank you for just an awesome presentation today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Dawn. I've had a great time.
No problem.
Good.
Thank you.
We enjoyed you. Thank you, Brian. And then Scout will, of course, be at our upcoming summit in the fall. Hopefully, he'll be bringing Sonia along with him. And Brian, I'm just going to give you a hint right now. The awards are still open. I think you've got a fabulous story to tell here. And Sonia makes you look really good, so you might want to make sure that you get a submittal before the awards close down. And so, folks, with that, I'm going to thank you for your time today, and I'm going to give you back about 4 minutes on your calendar. That's so generous of me. And so I look forward to seeing you on our webinar series very soon. And remember, just keep the conversation going. That's how we all learn and grow. So everybody have a wonderful morning, afternoon, or evening. Bye-bye.